Welcome everyone to Journeys of Faith. And today our guest is Deacon Russell Bergman, who's a transitional deacon from the Diocese of Albany, New York. He's a fourth-year seminarian at Pope St. John's Seminary in Weston, and he has been our deacon this year in his deacon internship program. So welcome, Deacon Russell. Happy to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Let's begin by talking about your early years of faith and your growing up and the role of faith in your family and any memories you may have of growing up and faith.
Of course, sure. So I would say probably my biggest influence would be my parents, and I think both of them equally were very influential, but in a very subtle way. They really lived their faith. They weren't really vocal about it, and I just thought that it just kind of crept into who I was. So I got that sense of just their reverence. You know, they always went to Mass, we say grace, but it wasn't, overly ostentatious or pious. It was just very...
That quiet living out of their faith.
Yeah, so that, and my grandparents too, probably more my maternal grandparents because we saw them more because they were closer.
Okay.
But yeah, just I just always, I enjoyed going to religious ed, and it was a Monday night program, so we went as a family, which was kind of nice. And it would be, we'd go off into our classroom, and then we'd come back and meet together in small groups with the families and with other kids, and I thought that worked really well, and it just kind of brought me into that church community. So,
were there any particular family traditions or rituals that you celebrated at home or in your parish?
Yeah, in home, the probably one I remember most was the Advent wreath.
Okay.
And the Advent calendar, especially too. My mom made that.
Oh.
So, and it was my brother and I, just the two of us. So we would take turns, sometimes getting a little argument over who's next to put on the next ball on the tree. But it was that was one of probably the strongest memories of just that.
Right.
Just being there and being participating with that. So
those family traditions kind of linger and have their impact on us. Okay, so we move into teenage years, young adulthood. What role did faith play, in that period? Yeah. Those are often crossroads periods for particularly young adults when you more and more independence, you chart your own course, you practice faith then as a young adult, not particularly in the surroundings of your family life. So how was that for you?
Yeah, it was mixed. I would say in Cub Scouts, so that was probably like 8 or 9 years old. There was a certain program that I went through. It was called, I think, Parvuli Dei. So I got involved in that. So that was really good. And then as I got into Boy Scouts, there was Adulteri Dei. So I was involved in those. So that was nice. But again, it was having faith at that age is not necessarily a popular thing.
It's not cool.
Yeah, so it was kind of like, it was very reserved. It was very internal. And it probably stayed that way until probably 15, 16 when I was starting to go through confirmation classes. Okay. And the priest that was teaching the confirmation class was wonderful. And that's when I really first thought about, I could maybe be a priest. I don't know. I mean, I got a bigger sense of the whole responsibilities of a priest, that not they're just there on the weekends to preach at Mass, but just the depth of their knowledge and of the things that they had to do. And I got a lot greater appreciation for that. And it was probably like senior year in high school, I started talking to the Vocation director and looking at, exploring that a little bit further. Went to, I think, a couple discernment events, and then went off to college. When I went to college, I got involved, actually in college, again, it wasn't cool to be a Catholic, and I went to a public school. I never went to a Catholic school until seminary, so.
Okay. And where did you go for college?
So college, I started at SUNY Oswego, which is up on Lake Ontario.
Okay.
And I went there for 3 semesters. And the first couple months I was there, I didn't go to church at all, but then I felt that disconnect, and I knew I needed something. So I started going to the Newman Center, and then I became part of that, and I became a Eucharistic minister there.
Oh.
So that was really good, and I got to know the pastor there, and I was kind of bringing my calling back a little bit, and I started contacting a few religious orders to see if this is something I want to pursue. I started taking some philosophy classes, thinking, oh, well, if I want to go to the priesthood, I should probably have a little philosophy background. After beginning my 4th semester, I got really sick. I got mono, but I didn't know what it was. I was just like completely wiped out, and I dropped out. And then went back to live with my parents for that semester. Then I went to a community college for a semester until I got into SUNY Albany, which was close by where I could commute. And then I finished my last 2 years there. And at SUNY Albany, that's when I switched to a philosophy major. So I knew part of it was because I liked it, and part of it was that's what I had the most credits for, and I wanted to, finish up school.
But in the back of your mind, you must have been thinking, somewhat at least, of the possibility of priesthood.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's exactly why I pursued a philosophy degree, because I knew that was a foundation for it. So
requirement to get into
that's
the
right.
seminary.
Yes.
So, though you had this priest who left quite an impact on you and maybe got you thinking more about the vocation of priesthood, you didn't wind up immediately going into the seminary.
That's right.
So tell us about that, Deacon Russ.
Of course. So my last semester at college, to finish up my philosophy degree, I had to take a graduate level course, and it was way over my head. And then just my last semester was just like so much work. I was done with school. I just wanted to be done.
Sure.
And my focus at that point was like, I want to get a job, I want to move out of my parents' house, and then, see what happens after that. So I had a philosophy degree, and that's not the most marketable degree to have, but I did end up getting into the insurance business because the reason I did is while I was going to college, I worked in the emergency room as an orderly. So I had a little medical background, so I ended up working in medical claims in the insurance business, so that's why they brought me on, because they said, oh, you have some medical terminology, so we can use you. And so I ended up in the insurance business, and then I ended up working my way up and had a lot of experience, and I just never intended to stay very long, and it was 24 years that I ended up in the insurance business.
All right.
Yeah.
And then you also met someone.
I did.
That you eventually married.
I did. So my first insurance job was very intense, and it was part of the culture that they wanted you to work pretty much all the time. They expected you to come in on weekends, and it was just really very grueling, and I was getting really tired of it. So fortunately, there was a round of layoffs that were coming up, and I got the choice, well, you can either be demoted or we can give you a severance package. And I said, okay, I'll take the package. I don't want to, I was planning on leaving anyway. So then I was unemployed for that whole summer. This happened in May. And that's when I started reevaluating where I was. And I was so involved in work, I didn't really have any social life. And I'm like, all my friends have girlfriends or are married or are starting families. And I thought, that's something that's missing in my life. So that's kind of when I went in that direction. And I did end up meeting someone. And I think 3 years later, we got married. So,
okay. Yeah. And what role did prayer or faith or church play in that decision, to get married? Is this something you fully embraced at the time, or just because other people were doing it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say faith and prayer were really upfront in that process. I mean, I was always going to church, but I never really joined a church. I was just going once a week. I was
Sure.
kind of marginally there. I was kind of, go in and come out, and then
Yeah.
I wasn't really involved in it. But yeah, I think there was a lot of societal pressure about I'm single, I'm in my 30s, and I got to meet somebody because that's what you have to do.
That's what
So I
you
kind of,
do.
that's where I kind of, I wouldn't say fell into it because it was something I actively pursued, but it was more like something I had to do.
Right.
Kind of like, I have to get a college degree, I have to get married. So it was just one of those things that I just, I pursued it and it happened.
So how long were you married?
Almost 11 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what happened in the marriage?
So I loved being married, and fortunately we're still very good friends, my ex-wife and I, so that's a beautiful thing. What happened is we, probably in the last 3 years, we just didn't really spend any time together. She was working 2 jobs and going to school at night, and then I had a job change, which was a salary reduction, so I got a second job. So we literally never saw each other for almost 3 years, and we just drifted apart. And she finally came to the realization, like, this isn't working. I don't want to be married anymore. And I said to her, if you don't want to be married, I don't want to get in your way. Because I respect her and I loved her that much. And I didn't.
Sure.
I also realized at that point too that I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to bring something back that never really was.
Yeah.
So so we amicably departed, and and it wasn't long after that my vocation resurfaced. So.
Well, let's talk about that because the end of the marriage brought obviously a divorce.
It did, yeah.
And so obviously you needed to seek an annulment.
That's right.
Before you moved into the seminary.
That's
and
right.
sought the priesthood.
Yep.
So was that idea, did that come immediately to mind, or did you pray about that? Did you work with someone else, to help you make that decision? How did that happen?
Yeah, it was a combination of all those things. And looking back, I can see God was working the whole time. What I was doing at that point was every morning I was going on walks for at least an hour, if not 2, and I would be listening to music and just enjoying that. And so I had that time built in, and right after the marriage broke down, I knew I had all that time. I just turned the music off and I just turned into God and I just started praying. And that's when the prayers really started, and then that's when everything started falling into place. I could pursue the priesthood, and I was like, well, I have a career, I have a house, and like, you can sell your house, you can get another job, I got to at least try this. So that's when I got in touch, a couple of months later, I got in touch with the vocation director. I didn't realize there was opportunities for guys of my age, but I was reassured that there were. And I didn't know there was a seminary that catered to guys that were, second career vocations, and that was very encouraging. So, and also just some of my friends, I told them like what I was considering, and I'm like, yeah, I can see you doing that. I'm like, wait, you know me, and you're telling me that I can do this? I'm like, so people could see things in me that I couldn't,
Okay.
and that was also very reassuring and just encouraging. So.
That's so affirming.
Absolutely.
That kind of support, particularly from your peers, your friends, others who tell you, I see you as a priest going forward. This was all latent in you, over the years.
Yes.
And it was just that divorce and then moving forward in the annulment process.
That's right.
That made you think, oh, maybe it is the priesthood for
That's right.
me.
That's right.
Okay, so and tell me about the annulment process. A lot of our viewers may be interested in what that's like.
Yeah.
And so what was it like for you?
I thought it was a very healing process. It's not easy because you have to really take a really close look at, you know, where you were, especially at the time you got married and leading up to the marriage, because that's what it's all about, focused on. And were you really ever sacramentally married is really what the whole process is trying to get at. And it wasn't until I was looking back I could see it, there was a lot of gaps there. And, you know, it was very enlightening to go through like all the steps of, you know, what went into your decision processes, and, you know, where were you at the time you got married. And I just, going back to my original point, it was more something that I wanted than it was really what God wanted. And I don't think it was until after my marriage was over that I really understood it's a vocation. And in my case, it was like something I wanted to do, something she wanted to do, and it was more of a, you know, something that fit us at the time, but it was never really a calling. It was never really sacramental because we, you know, she wasn't Catholic either. I don't know if that helped or hurt the situation, but yeah, it was just, but it was a very helpful healing process, and it helped me just take a good assessment of, you know, where my life was and some of the choices and some of the consequences from my choices. But it was wonderful.
So annulment is really a declaration that for one reason or another, when the marriage took place, there was not the stuff, the necessary elements of the sacrament of marriage present, and therefore it really wasn't a marriage, a valid marriage. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, there you are. You've gone through the annulment process, and I love what you said about, you know, this may have been my decision to get married, but I don't think it was God's decision.
Yeah.
So, how did you react to the reception of that annulment, and what did you think of at that point? Were you ready to enter the seminary, do you think?
Well, yeah, because I was actually discerning the priesthood while I was going through my divorce and annulment process. And I was really happy when the annulment came in, because that meant I could actually finish my application for the seminary. So that was a wonderful thing. And I think that most people that are getting annulments have a reason for it. It's because they want to do something else. Most of them want to get remarried. So usually it comes as a relief. And it's very liberating and freeing because you're free to marry. It gives you a whole new, you know, a liberation that you didn't have before.
And your former spouse is free to marry.
That's right, yeah. So it was just very, as a matter of fact, we actually went out to dinner to celebrate the annulment. It might be kind of weird, but
really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And I know I had Italian wedding soup. It was just kind of ironic on that night. But yeah, so it was just it was good for both of us, and it was very freeing.
Okay. So, and then immediately did you seek, entrance into Pope St. John's Seminary, or did you take time to reflect and discern and pray and consult, all of that?
Yeah, so while I was still going through the divorce and annulment, I was involved with, they have what's called a discernment house in Albany, and I was going there once a week, and they had formation sessions, so it was almost like a pre-theology type situation. I also had a spiritual director that I would meet with monthly. So I was discerning the whole time, and the spiritual director, I think, was very concerned about, you know, you're just getting out over a divorce, and you're going through that. So
jumping into
so he was very. He really pushed me on that, and he said, you know, is this, you know, something that is this the right time for you? Is this genuine? But I think it turned out okay. So actually when the annulment came, I had already done everything I could for my application to the priesthood. So to apply, you have to, you know, fill out all this paperwork, and actually a lot of the stuff I did for my annulment was similar to what you have to do in the priesthood application form, so it's kind of worked in my favor. So you have to be approved as a seminarian in your diocese before you can go to the seminary. So I think my annulment came
You
in.
needed a sponsorship.
Yes, exactly. So a diocese has to sponsor you, that's correct. So I finished my annulment, came in January. I submitted my application to the priesthood in February. I was voted on and accepted as a seminarian in March. And then I was accepted to the seminary that May. And then I still had a house. So I put my house on the market, and it sold it was like from the date I put it on the market to the closing was like 6 weeks. It was just incredibly fast. I could just tell, like, Holy Spirit's helping me out again. So it was wonderful.
So you must have thought God was working on your behalf to move you to the next
Absolutely, yeah.
step of your life, which was the seminary.
That's right.
So what, in your years at Pope St. John 23rd
Yeah.
Seminary in Weston, what impact has that had on your faith, your relationship with God,
Yeah.
your sense of vocation?
It's just been amazing. The formation there is excellent, and I think I matured a lot, and I learned so much there, not just academically, but just spiritually, and how to really embrace the faith from a very a lot more mature understanding, balancing faith and reason, and just I have a much greater sense of how comprehensive the faith is, the Catholic Church. It's so organized, and there's some things that people might not like about it, but I think a lot of it is just lack of understanding. The more that I learn about the faith, the more I love it, the more I embrace it, the more I respect it, and just like the years of tradition and just the teaching that's evolved is just I'm still learning it, and I think that's the beautiful part of the faith is this. There's so much to learn, you're never going to run out of material. So it's just an ongoing process and just evolution personally, as does the church itself evolve.
So speaking of evolve,
Yeah.
how has your faith evolved, grown,
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, your image of God,
Yeah.
perhaps, how you have quite a story that you're sharing
Yeah.
with us today. So can you trace, an evolution of your relationship with God, your image of God,
Yeah.
The impact your faith has had on you all along?
Sure, that's a lot of questions, but I would say it definitely matured, and I think the way I understand how it matured, it was very internal. So I was very reluctant to share my faith with anybody didn't want to be rejected, and it was just too personal for me to share. And it was also very, for lack of a better word, self-interested. A lot of things I would pray for, my needs. But as it evolved, I started praying for other people, and it was a lot more outward, a lot more intercessory, and just a lot more gratitude of just recognizing how God is working in my life and how I need His help and guidance more and more. And the further on I go, the less I know, so the more I need Him. It's just, so I think that's probably the best way to explain it.
I think your point earlier about marriage may have been your choice,
Yeah.
a choice that maybe the culture, the society would endorse and your peers,
Yeah.
but it wasn't really God's choice for you.
Well,
Unless you look at it from the long view and
Yeah.
say, well, this is a step along the way.
I think that's more accurate, because I would say I think I was meant to be married for the time that I was, because I learned so much, and I have a greater appreciation for the sacrament now than I ever would have had, or never having gone through it. So, and I appreciate it more. I appreciate the vocational aspect of it, and I encourage people to embrace that I never really heard it. So that's something I want to take into my ministry, is just let people understand the vocational aspect of it, and
Discerning the call.
exactly, because you're always called by God. It's just how you choose to respond, or if you respond at all. is part of the challenge. So yeah, I think it was God's call for me, but it wasn't a permanent thing.
So just a few months now away from ordination to priesthood, and just looking back at your whole journey, first of all, what has helped your faith to grow, Russell? With any particular aspect of your life, your spiritual life, that's help your faith grow?
Yeah, I think the integration of what I learned at seminary and just putting it into practice. And I think for me, the most personally rewarding and faith building were all the times I've had pastoral assignments. So when I was at the nursing home and my summer assignments and certainly my time here, just bringing everything together and just being a part of the community and embracing that and just bringing what I have, and through God, it's not really me working, it's God working through me, but just trying to bring everything together in a cohesive and way has been the most helpful to me. I think there's a danger in seminary that you can get just too caught up in the academics, and it can be very isolating actually. So it's so refreshing to get back into the community and realize you're here to serve others. You're not here to just sit in a room and read a theology book. It's so much more than that. I mean, as important as that is, that's just the foundation.
Yeah, obviously the academic component of seminary formation helps you to serve the people of God, whether you're preaching or teaching or advising, in spiritual direction. But I think your point is so well taken, that formation of one kind or another, whether it's priestly formation or lay formation, is so helpful in helping us to discern God's plan for us and to live out our faith every day.
That's right.
So one final question.
Sure.
Looking back at your pretty amazing story of how God eventually called you, into the priesthood. There were hints of that call, and you heard echoes of that call along the way, and then you eventually responded.
Yes.
What lessons about faith could you share with our viewers now? Lessons you've learned over the years based on your journey of faith.
So be open. And what I mean by that is don't be so self-absorbed and think you have as much control as you think you might have, because you really don't. And just be open to the fact that God is always working in your life, that He's always giving you opportunities to turn things around if you're not going in a direction that is healthy for you or is right for you. And you have to be open to that, and just being open to prayer, and just it's hard to describe. You just kind of know it when those little subtle ways that God is working in your life, that it just makes sense at that moment, and you're like, okay, now I get it. And sometimes, like in my case, when it's at a really difficult point, like the breakdown of a marriage is tough. It was really hard. But it was at that point that I was so open to God helping me, and just to really use those difficult times in your life to be even more open when you're the most vulnerable, and just let Him in, and just let the faith do it work.
When we're at our low point, sometimes that's when God can work best.
That's right.
In us. And but thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, and
my pleasure.
We look forward to the next episode, the next interview in Journeys of Faith. Thanks for joining us.